Alright, page 23. The UC Passenger Car Equipment with Quick Service Feature Instruction Pamphlet 5054. May 1936. Westinghouse Air Brake Company. Alright, your pressure retaining valve bypass choke. The retaining valve recommended for the passenger ship of the EA stand with a 10-pound single pressure for the type of the modified with the drilling bypass choke port through the closing valve side of the choke is varied with the side of the brake cylinder with the retaining valve used. The release rate is effective with the bypass port until the brake cylinder pressure has reduced the pound with the two of the closing point. By low closing point, the brake cylinder air may gradually blow down when the provides the brake is not entirely released. While recharging, also conserve the air supply with the venting of the movement of the brake cylinder piston to release during the recharge period. And it shows the picture of the pressure retaining valve with the bypass choke, exhaust, triple valve, RET, quarter-inch test pipe. Alright, the following table specifies the drill side with a bypass choke with a closing valve that provide with the proper blowdown rate with a different brake cylinder size. Show the brake cylinder 12-inch 4-2 and then choke drill size. The Key 6 has 3 outlets, one with the atmosphere through the exhaust port C with the one with the closing valve, 4 with the passage G, 1 with a quarter-inch tap mark, 1/4 pipe test gauge. The closing valve of the 4 is normally held with the C with a pring 20 with the closing passage G. With the handle is turned figure 13 passage A, Key containing X chamber D, which is connected with the universal valve exhaust. The exhaust passage C with the atmosphere with the handle with the turn with the horizontal position. Passage A connects chamber D below with the key with the passage G. Also, the brake cylinder is released and air flows retaining valve chamber D through the passage D underneath. Closing valve, which must lift against the pressure spring 20 in order to flow with the atmosphere through the vent port. Cap nut. 3 is spring 20 capable of the retaining pressure of the 10-pound with the brake cylinder as long as the brake cylinder pressure is greater than that of the value 4 with the unseated exhaust atmosphere through. Vent ports being small for the make of the release, which of the slower than retaining valve is not used when the pressure has reduced to 10 pounds, is no longer able to hold the valve 4 open with the remaining 10 pounds blowed down with slower rate than the bypass choke and closing valve. Show the figure 12, show the central figure dirt collector. Alright, your central figure dirt collector. Central figure dirt collector is located with the branch pipe within orbit to protect the universal valve against the entrance of the pipe scale of sand, cinders, dirt, and a foreign substance of any kind. Figure 14, section view, standard check valve type, which is detectable enlarged dirt chamber with the check valve with the outstanding features. Design compromises 2 separate portions of the upper and body portion to which the pipe brackets can made lower and dirt chamber within. Contains brass for the umbrella-shaped check valve with the 2 portions that are bolted together. The joint between its protective beams with the rubber gasket. Detachable dirt chamber provides easier cleaning and increased capacity permanent with a longer time between cleaning periods may be the same as the universal valve of the brake cylinder. The purpose of the check valve is to hold the dirt chamber collected with the dirt under all conditions. Air brake operation body portion of the machine seat against the check valve seats. The heavy reduction of the pressure occurs above during the emergency application for the recharging empty equipment, thereby shutting off the communication between the dirt changer and the dirt collector outlet of the check valve is designed and placed in valve stem so the permit the rotating motion whereby any fine dust which may collect on the top of the check valve will be shaken off into the dirt collector. Alright, conductor's valve. The conductor's valves may be located with a convenient point over the car, preferably cord attached to the handle with the running of the length of the car. However, the one valve may be placed on each end, which will obviate the necessity of the cord when this valve is open. The B38 conductor's valve shows the 3/4-inch atmosphere, 3/4-inch brake pipe, and air from the brake pipe flows through it with the atmosphere setting with the brakes in emergency should thereby be used only in actual danger and should then be open as wide as possible, left open until the train stops. Alright, your pipe fixture. The purpose of the branch pipe T with the prevent the moisture with the pipe with the brake pipe with the maybe any cover with the drain with the branch pipe with the connection with the universal valve, while the central fecal dirt collector has proven the very efficient with the collecting mechanism moisture dirt over the piping air brake system, thereby protecting the universal valve U with the branch pipe. The illustrating figure 16 with the material assisted with the preventing of the 7 to the pipe with the moisture and the branch pipe sometimes occasion charging and testing the train with a poorly designed yard. plans are because of the locomotive that has sufficient reservoir capacity, cooling pipe with the interior of the precipitation of the water passing of the brake system, and thus fitting of the interior coating design, the outlet of the brake pipe to the branch pipe at the top of the air enter of the cave of the brake pipe flow of the upward chamber L, thence from the pipe of the opening of the side of the branch pipe of the moisture of the heavy particles, dirt passing on the brake pipe. Show of the branch pipe T. These fittings are made with the two forms, one half of the branch pipe connection side with the other half of the connection of the bottom of the last otherwise specified form and illustrated in figure 16. The firm will be furnished cutout cock. Figure 17, which are two 1-inch, one branch pipe, one brake cylinder. The cock of the branch pipe with the clove with the cutoff of communication between the branch pipe and the universal valve. The cock of the branch cylinder has a side vent when the cock is closed. Vent brake of the cylinder pressure happens to provide with a much quicker with the more convenient of the method of releasing the brake cylinder pressure is often necessary in order to replace with the shoe. They may quickly repair with the brake reading, the draining, recharging cylinder reservoir to avoid a brake failure. Failure that the cock should be open again when the work is finished. Show the cutout cock in figure 17. These cocks should be placed with where they can easily be reached for protective of the accidental closing and the valve handle with such position as affected by vibration tend to jar open instead of shut. Alright, improved angle cock. Figure 18 and 19 illustrate the angle cock, which was recently modified with the prevent the improved method of the installation simplified handle, remove the extension of the U-bolt groove with the brake with the branch pipe and brake pipe end. Angle cock serve the support of the brake pipe connected with the angle cock with the groove of the extension permit with the angle cock positively attached to the hanger brake bracket. Handle is moved with the independent of the cycle of the driving down the hinge pin. The handle may be moved the first, depressing it, then sliding it forward to permit the web to clear with the socket lugs. The handle, of course, locks in both open and closed position, locked in necessary slightly with the raised handle before turn. The ensure the against accidental opening and closing by being stepped on or flying missiles or lace rod chains. Figure 18 shows the angle cock improvements. Pipe supporting ring, the flange given the bearing on the cap, the standard hexagon portion thread location. Handle can be removed with the independents or sockets. Figure 19 shows sectional view of improved angle cock. Hose connections. Figure 20 make pipe continuously through the train when the cars are separated with the switching. The hose should be uncoupled to the hand to prevent rupture of the damage. Figure 20 show the hose. Dummy couplings. Figure 21 are provided at each end of the car. The hose couplings should be attached when not coupled and protect against injury to the housing coupling and during entry in the pipes. Figure 21 shows a dummy coupling. Alright, operating the equipment. Operation of the equipment is impossible to show all of the ports. The connection past various valves of a single connection taken with the universal valve. Figure 28 through 32 have been made to show the purely diagrammatic way of the relation with the various ports, but the actual portion of the mechanical construction of parts described what is necessary to make the connections operation more easily understood. On the folder, first diagrammatic view, figure 28, showing the isometric graduating valve, slide valve, their seat, the operating position, the diagrammatic isometric views corresponding port connections, equalizing slide valve C with the port G with the connect with the small end of the release position, H with the large end with the piston, D1 with the release of the slide valve with the seat, Z1 with the strip of the valve port, and M connect with the auxiliary reservoir, U1 connect with the strip of the reservoir, S1 connects the large end of the discharging valve chamber H. Release slide valve with the port Q connect with the chamber at the end of the charging valve L with the lead with the equalizing piston chamber C, emergency reservoir charging port N connects with the auxiliary reservoir. Quick recharge port C1 leads back with the high pressure B valve B1 lead with the emergency slide valve C U1 connect with the underside with the check valve 12 and S lead with the chamber between the end of the charging valve with A1 connect with the equalizing slide valve C to X. If the brake cylinder is off, the NW connect with the brake cylinder. Emergency slide valve C port O lead with the front of the high pressure valve O1 connect with the port O to T1 blanked by head pressure cap. F1 connects with the quick action piston. B1 leads the release slide valve. D, C, and D connect with the quick action closing chamber. A3 connect with the brake pipe. And W4 connect with the brake cylinder. Charging the system. To charge the brakes of the engine, brake man first bears play for the release position to permit a rapid recharge within running position, and the air main reservoir feed valve pressure, or as the case may be, flow through the brake valve into the brake pipe, thus through the train. Passing through each brake pipe with a universal valve on the car, the brake pipe air into the universal valve through the brake pipe passage A, flow in two directions through the quick action portion into the equalizing portion. So your charge would be from release to running. Charging quick action portion. Brake pipe ends through the passage A, flow over the upper side of the quick action valve with 85, which flow if not C with the air by air pressure valve with the tension of the spring 90. Air flows through the passage A through the steering 181, quick action port, steering filling of the P through the hair string of the passage A to the protection valve 111, and the high pressure cap of the protection valve 111. It will be on the brake pipe lower seat, with no air system. The brake pipe pressure reach of approximately 45 pounds. Valve will be forward with the brake pipe seat with the atmospheric upper seat with the allow the brake air flow through the passage A2 with the ball check with 153 prevent the direct flow with the chamber A with the rapid emergency position 76 with the pressure build up with the chamber that must be choke the root choke 157 the port 8 through 5 then chamber A with the through fouling piece with the prevent such as sudden build up of the pressure A which slam in the emergency piston 76 in the release position. Brake pipe pressure A also flows around the protection valve left in the passage A2 with the ball check 99 through passage A3 and port A4 with the emergency slide valve 78 with the passing ball check choke 102 with the emergency graduating valve thus the charging emergency slide valve chamber B. Quick action chamber chart with the brake pipe pressure from chamber B through the passage E with the quick action choking chamber through with the E1 cavity slide valve passage. G is slide valve C with the ball choking valve 102 for a feature of the clearance between it and walls of the cavity govern the rate of the change of slide valve charge B with the quick section action chamber, quick action closing chamber. Alright, charging the equalizing portion, brake pipe airflow through the passage B with the cavity beneath the tram of the B4 with the beneath the charging of the passing 54 with the root B2 with the top of the application of the bypass 54 with the conjunction of the spring 57. Keep the valve 54C with normally the pressure passes through the strand B5 with the ends through the equalizing piston chamber C with the passage B3 with the cavity above the chamber with the bypass valve 54 with the spring 57 assist. Keep valve 54 and C with the shit stream with the restrict the build up with the passage B3 with the ability to retard with the passage pressure and passage B4 unsee with the valve 54 and passes B3 and B5 chamber C with the bypass feature operate with the dirt restriction. Causes 2-pound differential across the strain with the charging bypass check valve with the consequence there is no interference with normal charging due to the strainer. In the absence of pressure slide valve chamber G, the equalizing piston 4 graduating valve 7. Slide valve are forced to full release position shown figure 28 graduated release position 30 with the held with lower piston position spring 32. The real release piston 16 held with the release position 21 lower end of the piston the inner seal. Connect the exhaust valve passage G and then port F and cavity D graduating the valve cavity E slide valve. Port H leaving the upper end of the release position banked in the equalizing slide valve. Release slide valve 19 now connects the brake cylinder passage the exhaust passage X through the cavity K1. Also opens various charge ports explained later. Alright, your brake pipe air can flow with the equalizing piston chamber in two directions. One through the feed groove of the K with the slide valve chamber G through into the passage M to the auxiliary reservoir with its charging it, thus passage S1 bottom phase charging valve. 34 thus force upward connecting passages R and S resistant increasing cavities T into the face of the equalizing slide valve. Also connects the auxiliary reservoir pressure. Alright, through pressure L, pass ball check 12 with the release slide valve chamber I. This chamber I flows with the passage V2, V and V, the emergency reservoir through thus charging it. Airflow with the same chamber, the passage B and P, Q, and R around with the charging valve, S and passes S and T, and the release sliding valve with the passage U1 and under the ball check valve 12 into the passage U, the strip of the reservoir, thus recharging it. Alright, figure 22 and 23. 22, graduated release cap, graduated release position. 23, graduated release cap in the direct release position. You can't really see very much, sir. Alright, chamber L below with the graduated release piston 30 with the connection with the chamber to I, with which with the term connect with the emergency reservoir passage with Q, P, and Q connect the chamber to L with the cavity R with the charging valve with the top A with the charging valve with the connect with the strip of the reservoir pressure passage S through passage Q1. Air can also flow from the release side of the valve chamber to passage C2 and C1 to the back of the high pressure valve 123. Then through passage M1 back with the intercepting valve 117 middle cavity with the direct communication emergency reservoir through the valve V1 and V and the interface with the interior intercepting valve 117 is connecting the strip of the reservoir Through passage U2 and U, the valve will be held with the C with the spring 121, the face with the high pressure, valve 133 with the connect with the atmosphere through the passage of the cavity, passage O and cavity N, and the emergency slide valve 78 with the cutout valve with 141 and held with the lower seat, and spring 146, the initial charge operation same regardless of whether the graduated release cap is in the direct or ungradulated release position. Alright, recharge after application, graduated release cap set with graduated release position, graduated release cap set with the graduated release position, auxiliary reservoir charge with the brake pipe with the feed groove K with the emergency reservoir, which is connected with the release slide valve, chamber I with the ports V and V2, and chamber N the turn connected with the auxiliary reservoir port N1, release slide valve port N through the graduated release cap, thence for the passage M to the auxiliary reservoir, since the emergency reservoir is fully charged with auxiliary mainly charge from the shore of the emergency reservoir pressure to the decrease of the during the recharge auxiliary reservoir pressure increase above that of the surface of the reservoir with the charging valve will be moved and up surface of the reservoir will be recharged with the emergency reservoir for the way with the port P with the release slide valve passage Q through the cavity and recharging valve passage S and cavity T within the slide valve with the passage U1 under the ball check 112 passage U, the passage R, to the left, the charging 34 with the connect with the emergency reservoir, passage Q with the port P with the chamber I with the passage V2, passage S to the right is connected with the surface of the reservoir, cavity T with the passage U1 and U. Consequently, these two passages have connected together, lifting with the charging with the surface valve, reach reservoir and charge with the emergency reservoir approximately the same rate with the auxiliary as being recharged. Since the emergency reservoir has depleted with the recharging auxiliary and surface reservoir is recharged with the brake pipe and with the initial charge as soon as the brake pipe pressure becomes higher than the emergency reservoir pressure. Recharging after application, graduated release cap at the direct release position, graduated release cap at the direct release position, auxiliary reservoir recharged directly. Brake pipe with V groove with K port M leading from the chamber I with the emergency reservoir pressure for the auxiliary reservoir being blanked in by graduating release cap. Charging surface of the reservoir is controlled by the charging valve and the direct release. The charging surface of the reservoir must not be more rapid rate with the auxiliary reservoir with the exact amount of the brake pipe cylinder would obtain with the necessary. Reapply the brake before fully recharged as in for the second application. The two applications stop. This is controlled by charging valve. Move up and down with the auxiliary reservoir. Charge with the cutting off of the flow pressure for the emergency reservoir. Surface of the reservoir. Later, charge with approximately the same pressure of the auxiliary reservoir. Again, opening connection emergency reservoir. Surface of the reservoir with the pressure later was slightly less than the auxiliary reservoir. Quick action, closing chamber charge with the same manner initial after an application. Alright, quick surface valve figure 29 to apply with the brakes application the suitable brake pipe reduction with the engine brake valve. Reduce the pressure of the passage leading of the emergency portion through the passage A2 with the top of the ball check 153 momentarily lifted with a greater pressure beneath it, thereby reducing pressure chamber A face with the emergency valve. Piston, the differential cover the emergency piston with the creation because cover the piston to the move of the carrying with the graduated valve with a quick surface position with the cavity W with the insects establish the connection between two slide valve ports A4 and W5 with the brake pipe pressure, A2 with the down lift of the brake on ball check with 99 with the flow with the passage A3 with the port, A4 with the cavity W6 with the W5, passage 4 with the W pass ball check with the 99 pass with the W3 through the choke valve 233 with the passenger with the W with the brake cylinder. Light reduction in brake pipe pressure is required to obtain the foregoing operation between the emergency piston move the graduating valve with the quick surface function with the quick simultaneously reduction brake pipe with the pressure for each of the train when the result of the brake pipe lying uniformly preventing hard slack action. In quick surface position, quick action chamber air with the connect with the atmosphere through the vent port with the graduating valve with the port J1 with the emergency slide valve thereby reducing quick action chamber pressure. Vent port with the graduating valve with the touch side with the movement of the emergency slide valve with the emergency position will not occur until the brake pipe pressure is reduced to an emergency rate. Ball check valve 99 prevents the backflow of the brake cylinder to the brake pipe. In event of the brake pipe pressure should become lower than the brake cylinder pressure. Ball check valve 99 prevents quick action closing chamber volumes being added to the brake pipe volume during the surface reduction. Quick surface choke of the 233 is insert of the brake cylinder passage W3 with the purpose of controlling quick surface activity. The choke must be able to be proper size to suit the brake pipe volume on the car listed on page 23. Alright, Momo. Alright, surface figure 29. Consequently, the quick surface previously described with the initial reduction and reduce the pressure chain with the continued with the brake pipe side with the equalizing piston forward below the auxiliary reservoir acting on the opposite side with the piston chamber G. Pressure is withdrawn through passage B valve and then through the stream of the passage B of the atmosphere. Normal application bypass valve 54 remains. C with the pressure passage B through reduced with the same rate with the flow with the trim, and the half of the trim should be restricted sufficiently to create with a 2-pound differential between the pressure above and beneath the valve of the spring. When they overcome the valve 54 will unseat with the passing pressure through passage B2 with its normal reduction rate. Slightest differential pressure created with the first valve of the equalizing piston only to move upward close with the feed groove K charging port L with the reduce the minimum brake backflow with auxiliary reservoir brake pipe with the feed groove that prevents air from the emergency reservoir and chamber C with the charging check valve 12 with leaking. This ensures brake pipe protection will be more effectively accompanying the obviously desired. Alright, following this reduction, continue with the graduating valve 7 with an upward piston with the connecting cavity T with a slide valve with the atmosphere with the cavity D with the graduating valve with the increase with the force holding slide valve with the sheet with the instrument with the very little reduction will not apply with the giving into the valve needed stability with the resistant cavity T are now made resistant to move with the durable during application less than the U12 with universal valve with a different acting piston reef with the predetermined desired value. Slide valve 3 with its move with the upward surface position shown in figure 29. Your release position 16 is held with the release position spring 21 to cover the inner air with the lower end of the piston was connected with the atmosphere through the passage G and F and cavity D with the equalizing slide valve down shift the position with the passage G is blank with the passage H is leading with the upper end of the release position of the opening atmosphere with the cavity E. It will be noted that the emergency reservoir pressure will always with the chamber I with the upper end of the piston 16 is larger than the lower end. The forcing tending to hold the position, release position, spring pressure, the plus of the emergency reservoir pressure acting in the area of the lower piston inside of the shielding, the force tending with the move of the upward and emergency reservoir pressure acting on the whole area of the upper end. Consequently, sufficient differential builds up in the forward of the release position, upper seat into the shoulder position, emergency reservoir air with the equal into the passage through with the small port with the lower end of the piston. Should be noted with the movement of the equalizing slide of the valve that required the actuate the release position. Should be again for the possibility of piston graduating valve floating over and causing the release of the piston slide valve with the close of the exhaust port, which might cause the trouble should brakes creep on due to the leakage where the slide valve is now in the position. BNC exhaust ports closed with service reservoir charge U1 quickly charging port N. The equalizing slide now with the strip of the position with the strip of the reservoir communication slide valve chamber G with the passage U1 with the passage strip of the reservoir check valve 12 with the auxiliary reservoir being always communication with the chamber. Air can now flow with the combined valve with these reservoirs by way of chamber of G with the passage Z and Z1. Passage with the port and check valve 12 through the passage W with the brake cylinder with the supply with the brakes. The brake cylinder is communication with the safety valve through passage W and W1. Limit the brake cylinder pressure of 63 pounds. Serve with the application with the cap set graduated relief with graduated release piston 30. We'll move the piston shown again for the upper seat. The serve of the application is made with an auxiliary reservoir pressure acting upper side reduced by pressure L with the bottom of the emergency reservoir remaining initial value. A choke fitting 230 inch over the surface pipe port with the size of the proportion to give it the proper rate increase for the brake cylinder pressure, making it possible the same value of various cylinders. Simply by charging choke with the surface exhaust chokes with the universal valve with the list in page 23 will cover the brake of the valve very short with the retrains and the smaller brake cylinder size to apply with the release somewhat more slowly than the chokes formerly supplied with the U12 valve, being from the purpose of obtaining more uniform application and release brakes and through the train. Regardless of the length, it will not be noted that the S cavity and the cavity S is faced with the equalizing piston slide with the will has been performed. No function thus farther. Thus, should there be an excessive amount of friction between the graduating valve and the slide valve, such as to prevent graduating valve moving on the slide valve, both valves would be moved together, and it would be evident that there will be slide valve bias sort of the position. Yet, sort of the port would be blanked out with the graduating valves. In such event, cavity S connects with chamber G to do the brake cylinder passes Z1 through port M, thus ensuring against the possible brake failure of this cause. Alright, your service lap figure 30. To hold the brakes applied with the emergency brake application on the hold the lap position, further escape of the air from the brake pipe, preventing neither is there an increased pressure for the valve of the air auxiliary service reservoir with the brake cylinder have the reduce the pressure chamber G slightly below the remaining chamber C with the differential pressure will move this equalizing piston graduating valve down with the strip of the lap in this port position. Port Z is ported flow of the air over the brake cylinder, thereby stop the further movement to prevent the shoulder of the piston stem with the track to the end of the slide valve. 3. Slight difference of pressure sufficient for to move the piston. Graduating valve is unable to overcome an added resistance of the slide valve, hence there is no further movement. Described under the quick service of the emergency slide valve chamber of the rejuvenated port J1, same ratio rate is the pressure removed from the face of the piston. When the pressure in chamber B has been reduced to slightly below the brake pipe pressure in the front of the emergency position, in front of the emerging piston and piston graduating valve with the move to the left, with the preventing further flow of quick action chamber to the atmosphere with the brake pipe air to the brake cylinder. It will be noted equalizing slide valve 3 will remain with the surface position movement of the piston graduating valve with the moving required with the lap of the valve. Consequently, will the piston and slight reduction brake pipe pressure required again bring piston and graduating valve in surface position. In this manner, the brakes are applied with the shear of the step that usually stay with the graduated on. If more than full surface reduction is made before the brake valve will lap the air path with the auxiliary reservoir, surface the reservoir brake cylinder the atmosphere through the safety valve with the pressure of the volume that have been equalized after the safety valve setting. Such an overreduction is obviously waste of air as it continues below the protection with the valve setting emergency application will result in explaining the heading of the emergency. Alright, release, figure 28. Release of the brakes of the to release the brakes, brake valve handle is played with the release or running position according to the result of the desired. Increase the brake pipe pressure for the chamber C with the move of the equal piston, then increase the pressure for the chamber G with and do not change the position forward with the external of the piston, and then move downward. And the first move with the graduating valve with the lap forward toward lap, and just as described with the conservative resistance, increase the cavity T slide valve chamber G. So these cavities increase the slide valve with resistance when application is made with increase the resistance of the release. When the pressure chamber C has been sufficiently increased, the slide valve is moved downward toward the release position. It will eventually go all the way to release all cap with the shown figure 28 immediately with the cap set for the direct with the relief of the same. Since piston 30 with the balance of the auxiliary reservoir pressure above and below with the held C of the figure 28 with the cap and graduated release slide valve solve with the graduated release position piston 30 with the within force position shown figure 24, thereby doing full emergency pressure below with the reduced auxiliary reservoir pressure above. In either event, lower end with the release position 16 connect with the atmosphere through passage G, F, and cavity D, and with the graduating valve with the passage H leading to the support upper end, blank graduating valve in the former case. To hold the slide valve within later, the force now tending to the hold of the release slide valve with the surface position emergency reservoir acting on the air of the upper piston inside of the seal, while the force tends to the move of the piston toward downward emergency reservoir pressure reacting on the whole area of the lower piston, plus the testing of spring 21. Consequently, there is sufficient differential to force release piston downward to the lower seal of the release position emergency reservoir, equalizing passage H with a small pore at the end of the piston. Brake cylinder will exhaust the atmosphere through the passage W with the cavity K1, port Z, and Y1 with the releasing brakes. Choke fitting 231 is inserted in the exhaust port of the side of the proportion to give it the proper rate with the degree of the brake cylinder pressure, the making the possible use of the same valve with its various size cylinder, simply by changing the choke with the various side of the fittings of cylinders, which are shown in the table on page 23. Movement of the full release position is made positive by monetary connecting chamber G below the equalizing piston atmosphere, so that the relief of the movement that commences and certainly the complete with the equalizing piston move of the surface of the release position for release position move with corresponding with the equalizing slide valve approaching the release position chamber passage F register of the port D1 connecting chamber G, the atmosphere through passage J, F, D, and 1 and K1 connecting not broken. This connection is not broken until the release slide valve move the release position when only occurs. The equalizing slide valve move of the full release position feature prevents creation of the equilibrium pressures of the cause of the part to halt or crack port with a position feed groove with the exhaust port barely ensure positive unrestricted release. At the same time, parts release position being system recharge. Explain the detailed heading of recharging after application. It should be noted that during the operation, pressure of the brake pipe auxiliary reservoir sides of the and show the diagrammatic of this to give you the universal equalizing portion graduated release position. Not exactly the easiest thing in the world. Equalizing piston air arcs always a balance and shift with a quick response with the brake air reduction and increase the brake pipe pressure the air respectively. The operation may have occurred just proceeding so that many application relief of the quick succession may be desired and can be made without depletion The system, if the brake valve handle is in place for running position, left over the brake pipe pressure is fully restored. Pull out parts of the release position brake, thereby fully released. Graduated release, figure 24. If it is desired to relieve the brake cylinder pressure in the step of the graduated off, the graduated release cap must be the graduated release position of the brake valve and must be returned to the lap position before the brake pipe pressure has been restored to normal. In other words, if the brake pipe is entirely relieved of the brake pipe pressure, the fully restored, the pressure is only partially restored. Brakes will only partially release. The brake pipe pressure has increased in the equalizing slide valve start by toward the release position at the top of the graduated release position by the ground release position 30. During service of the application, thus forward with the equalizing piston chamber to become the pressure above it. The equalizing reservoir to keep the below the emergency reservoir that remains unchanged. The release piston slide valve then move to the release position, permitting the exhaust brake cylinder to explain on page 68. While the pressure above the equalizing piston does not increase, the brake valve is lapped, and the pressure below the piston does increase because of the emergency reservoir. Air is flowing through chamber G to the chamber I through the MSN, N1, and M. Pressure below the piston consistently makes the greater than above the causing the upward graduating valve with the loss of motion between piston stem and slide valve taken up with the graduated release position, figure 25. Diagrammatic view of the unreleased valve of the equalizing graduated release valve lap position. Alright, the application end of the release piston of the connect with the atmosphere release, the end of the connection blanked out with the release side of the valve is moved with the release service position, explained under service and service position exhaust port for connecting with the brake cylinder with the atmosphere blank with the air remaining in the cylinder is retained with the brake cylinder pressure can be released with successful steps. Auxiliary reservoir equalized with the emergency graduated release position 30 remain in the normal position, spring permitting the return of the equalizer piston, slide valve with the less for fully released position. No further graduation can now be made. The brake pipe pressure can become fully restored. Exhaust air of the brake cylinder is completed. The amount of reduction in brake cylinder pressure for any graduation depends on the amount of the air pressure that has been restored in the brake pipe. Furthermore, graduated release function can be eliminated through the quick recharge auxiliary reservoir as lost. The quick recharge service of the reservoir is affected, which makes possible prompt reapplications at short intervals. It will be noted that there is said regarding the release operating that the two release positions, equalizing slide valve graduated full relief, the graduating valve may be controlled with the movement of the release position desired to gradually graduate the release without endangering unintended closing of the exhaust port with such might be possible, the graduating valve control the release position at all times. As it is arranged, movement of the slide valve must be effectively activated the release position when the parts are in full release position. Alright, emergency figure 31. Any reduction brake pipe pressure faster than the predetermined rate cover the emergency application for the brakes through the train through the highest cylinder pressure for the very short time. Equalizing portion operated with the same emergency as the surface of the operation. The description need to apply with the emergency portion. Apply with the brake pipe pressure to the 7 will reduce the pressure. Chamber A in the front of the emergency piston is reduced since the chamber is then connected with the brake pipe through the hole of the spring stop 185. The air A5 passes the emergency check valve 153, passage A2, path of the protection valve 111, passage A, the pressure on the emergency piston, thereby unbalanced and causing it to move with the emergency piston, carrying out graduation valve 80, slide valve 78, passing the emergency position before slide valve is passed, move of the graduating valve will uncover the port R with the slide valve, the air flows thus, meaning quick action closing chamber, the passage R and F1, underside of the quick action piston 88, forcing the piston upward, open action quick valves 85, venting brake pipe air into the atmosphere, venting thus initiated very quickly, serving to shorten the time required to transmit quick action through the train. When the emergency slide valve has moved to the emergency position, the quick action chamber is cut off. The quick action closing chamber is connected through the underside of the quick action piston 88 passages D, E, 1, E, and F1 with the volume of the air closed from the quick action position piston to remain only open with a definite time until the pressure is reduced a certain valve, thus through a small hole of the quick action piston. The purpose of this twofold: first, to ensure the transmission of the quick action; second, to ensure the exhaust over the brake pipe pressure is restored as desired. The emergency slide valve connected to the back of the high pressure of the valve 123 atmosphere through cavity C1, cavity T to release slide valve passage B1, cavity M of the emergency slide valve at the back of the intercepting valve 117 connected to the back of the high pressure valve with the message M of the back pressure back of the former becomes atmospherically monetarily. Surface reservoir pressure relief presents up at the front with the intercepting valve with moves it right from the so that the air from the reservoir can flow over the ports U and U2. Port X1 opening the high pressure valve 123, lifting off cutting valve 141. The upper seat flow through the passage W1 and W of the brake cylinder. This covers the quick drop of the tip of the reservoir pressure acting left of the intercepting valve of the air as the brake cylinder pressure presented the right valve. The pressure acting on the valve of the equalizing spring 121 then moved the valve to the left that prevents further flow of the pressure from surface the reservoir. Auxiliary reservoir pressure flow of the brake cylinder through the surface of the port in the same manner of the during surface application that does not flow with a quick surface reservoir pressure, therefore does not equal the brake cylinder until the air surface reservoir is cut off. The intercepting valve, consequently, auxiliary reservoir pressure is higher than surface reservoir pressure, but is prevented flowing surface reservoir ball check 12. The intercepting valve, figure 32, with the emergency reservoir pressure presenting V1 flow with the cavity intercepting valve past X1 onto the brake cylinder pressure increase with the auxiliary reservoir preventing the flowing with auxiliary reservoir ball check valve 12. Cutout valve render the safety valve inoperable. High pressure is secure for the brake cylinder and due to the large pass is secure with a very short time. In order to ensure the brake cylinder is also being closed with emergency ports over the function of the release slide valve move with the surface position before pressure isn't prevented behind with the high pressure valve. The quick action chamber to connect with the brake cylinder port A2, O2, emergency slide valve position O1 and O pass cutoff valve 141 less than passaging W1 and 1. W1 and W, this maintaining the pressure chamber again for the possible leakage. Ensure emergency position valve remaining emergency position. Our protective valve with 111 that covers the emergency application when the brake pipe pressure falls to 35 pounds. Normally the valve is held with the atmospheric speed of the wind and the brake pipe pressure becomes less than the predetermined minimum. Spring 115 move the valve of the brake pipe seat with the shown figure 32 connect with the passage 80 with the atmosphere through the vent and the protective valve cap of the produce the emergency rate reduction of the emergency piston is accumulated actuated with the result as described. All right, your release after emergency brake pipe pressure is before when the brake pipe pressure is being restored after emergency application for the protection valve 111 will be the first to go back to the normal position, taking the place if the pressure has reached approximately 45 pounds. Brake pipe will be admitted with the chamber A through passage A, but since the quick action chamber the pressure maintained equally with the brake cylinder, with the brake pipe pressure is insufficient to move the emergency piston to the release position. The brake pipe pressure is acting on the face of the equalizing piston has been slight up slider higher than the remaining auxiliary reservoir. The first stage of the equalizing the piston valve that was related stage of the equalizing with the piston with the valve, the return with the release position, which will turn call the release position slide valves to return to their release position manner previously discovered. The permits air flow with the chamber I through port C2 with the passage C1 to the back of the high pressure valve 123, which will then be balanced return to the normal position of spring 128, cutting over the communication between the passage X1 and the passage leading the lower side of the cutoff valve, with the consequently between the brake cylinder and the emergency reservoir. During the time air has exhausting of the brake cylinder for the port W, cavity K1, releasing slide valve through passage K, X1, X and Y1. Alright, when the pressure in the emergency slide valve chamber of the ABB has been reduced at the point with the brake pipe and chamber A with the combined with the spring 186 with the balance of the power. 186 with the balance of the power emergency position. Emergency piston, return with the slide valve release position. Additional exhaust provided with the brake cylinder air passage W1O and cavity N, emergency slide valve seat. Until the cutoff valve 141 closed for the remaining air escapes through unusual exhaust patch of the reservoir chambers, then will be recharged in this usual manner. Alright, installation and maintenance. We'll cut the tape there.